when my hearing returned after 3 silent weeks. The first voices I heard were from my daughter and my son-in-law calling me an old burden. That moment ignited my plan, and what happened inside my own home afterward is something only I know. Before I share everything that unfolded, do me one small favor. Tap subscribe and tell me where you're watching from so I know how far this story travels. The world came back to me in pieces. First, the soft electronic pulse of the heart monitor, steady and rhythmic. Then the faint squeak of a nurse's shoes gliding across the polished floor. After 3 weeks of absolute silence, every tiny sound felt like a gift being unwrapped. My doctor, Dr. Patel, adjusted the headphones over my ears, her smile wide with anticipation. "Mr. Mercer, can you hear this?" she asked, tapping a small device. A tone rang in my left ear. Clear, pure, undeniable. I nodded, afraid my voice might crack if I tried speaking too soon. Another tone. Another. Each one crisp, grounded, real. I pressed my hand against my chest just to feel the vibrations of my own breath. When I finally whispered, "I can hear everything," the sound of my own voice nearly brought tears to my eyes. 3 weeks earlier, a malfunctioning concrete drill at the construction site had taken all sound from my world. Temporary deafness, the specialists had said, maybe permanent, others had warned, but now, here the sounds were: footsteps, rustling paper, even the hum of a distant elevator. It was like stepping out of darkness into bright morning sunlight. My daughter, Emily, would be shocked. For 3 weeks she had been writing notes for me, tapping my shoulder to get my attention, moving around the house like a caretaker in a stage play. My son-in-law, Mark, had brought home groceries, taken calls on my behalf, and performed the role of a dutiful family member with a precision that now made my stomach twist. I thought of surprising him the moment I got home, calling out my daughter's name, maybe even laughing as I told her the miracle had happened. The thought warmed me, but that warmth wouldn't last. Discharge paperwork felt like magic. Pen scratching against paper, the rustle of forms being handed to me, the light click of a clipboard being placed onto a counter. I thanked the hospital staff with shaky voice and walked toward the parking garage, listening to the echo of my own footsteps. When I pulled into the driveway of my home in Redwood Hills, I sat for a moment inside the car just to soak in suburban symphony. Birds chirping, a passing car, the faint laughter of kids 2 houses down. The home I shared with my wife, Helen, sat calm and familiar before me. We had bought it 35 years ago, long before Emily grew into the complicated adult she was now. Helen passed 5 years earlier, leaving me with memories that still felt warm. I wanted to tell her about my hearing returning. I could almost hear her response. "See? Miracles still happen, Ed." I climbed the porch steps and reached for the doorknob. That was when I froze. My daughter's voice drifted through the crack of the door, loud, sharp, unfiltered. "Thank God that old burden is finally coming home," Emily said, her tone drenched in irritation. My stomach dropped. She continued, 3 weeks of pretending I cared about every little thing. I'm exhausted." My son-in-law responded, his voice casual, almost amused. "Well, at least the insurance money covered Mark's hospital bills. Could have been worse." It was like a beam of steel struck my chest. Those words were the first I had heard in 3 weeks. Those words. I stood perfectly still, hand on the doorknob, heart pounding so hard I felt in my teeth. I had expected celebration, maybe tears, maybe relief. Instead, I heard calculations. Resentment. Disgust. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My daughter, my only child, called me a burden. Not only that, there was something else in her tone. Something sharp. Something planned. I eased the door open quietly. Years of construction work had trained me to move silently through risky spaces. I stepped inside and remained in the hallway, listening. "Sunset Pines is only $4,800 a month," Emily said. "If we push the doctor to sign off on the evaluation, we can get Dad placed there before the end of the month." Evaluation? My body turned to ice. Mark replied, voice low and practical. The appraisal came back good. Once the house is emptied, we're looking at around $470 after the mortgage payoff. More than enough for a new place in Cedar Bay. My home, my savings, my life, they were dividing it like an inheritance. I leaned against the wall, gripping it to stay upright. Emily laughed then, a short, cold sound that didn't belong to the daughter I had raised. It's perfect. Once Dad's tucked away, we start renovations right away. Open up the dining room, add value, list by spring. My throat tightened. I wanted to burst in, scream, demand answers. But something stopped me. A sudden clarity. If I walked into that kitchen angry and exposed, I would lose every ounce of advantage. My daughter believed I was deaf. My son-in-law believed I was helpless. They believed they had time. I would use that. Silently, I pulled myself together and walked with heavy, deliberate steps into the kitchen. Emily spun around so quickly her hair snapped across her face. "Dad!" she shouted loudly as if speaking to a child. "You're home. How are you feeling?" Her voice dripped with sweetness, so thick it made my skin crawl. Mark's expression shifted from annoyance to instant sympathy. "Welcome back, sir," he said too loudly, patting my shoulder like an actor missing his cue. I pointed to my ears, squinting as if confused. Emily grabbed her little notepad, the one she'd been using for weeks, and scribbled quickly. "Doctor says hearing might come back slowly. We're so happy you're home." I forced myself to smile. I even pretended to struggle with her handwriting, leaning in dramatically. She added another note underneath. "We'll help with anything you need." The words made my stomach twist. I nodded gratefully, watching them carefully. Emily squeezed my arm lovingly, an act that looked tender but now felt calculated. Mark fetched me tea with exaggerated kindness. Their masks were flawless, until they thought I walked away. I told them I needed rest and climbed the stairs slowly. My daughter watched me with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. When I reached my bedroom and shut the door, I waited. 30 seconds later, their voices floated up the hallway vent. "Perfect," Emily whispered. "He bought it completely." My hand clenched into a fist. From the vent came more. "Dr. Holloway will write whatever valuation we need," Mark said. "Confusion, memory issues, decline, easy." Emily exhaled. "Good. Once Dad signs a few things, accidentally, everything will be in place." My breath froze. They weren't planning to put me in a retirement home. They were planning to declare me incompetent. I sat on the bed, staring at Helen's old wedding ring on the nightstand. I picked it up, feeling the cool metal soften in my hand. Helen always warned me I was too trusting. Not anymore. I spent the next hour going through my old paperwork drawer. Receipts, bills, a stack of financial statements, and under a faded envelope from Helen's funeral, a business card. Graham Ellis, attorney at law. He handled Helen's estate. He told me 3 times over the years to update my will. I never did. Tomorrow I would. That night, I positioned myself near the hallway vent and listened to every word my daughter and my son-in-law whispered. Every detail, every timeline, every bit of evidence I would eventually need. My daughter thought she had everything under control. My son-in-law thought he was smarter than me, but they underestimated one thing. A man who has survived grief, silence, and betrayal becomes very dangerous when silence is finally broken. And I intended to make sure neither of them forgot that. I barely slept that night. Not because of fear, but because of focus. The words drifting up from the hallway vent replayed over and over. My daughter and my son-in-law were not simply irritated caretakers. They were strategists. Every sentence had been calculated. Every whisper shaped into a plan to remove me from my own home and my own life. I lay awake until dawn, watching the light creep across the ceiling the way Helen used to when she couldn't sleep after a long shift. The memory steadied me. Helen had always said, "Truth reveals itself, Ed. You just have to keep your eyes open long enough." Well, my ears were open now too. When sunlight finally broke over Redwood Hills, I sat up with more clarity than I'd had in weeks. My first step had to be the lawyer. If my daughter believed I was deaf and powerless, then I would use that belief to build a foundation beneath my next move. I moved slowly down the stairs, keeping up the act. Unsure steps, Confused glances, the occasional shake of the head like someone still adjusting to hearing loss that hadn't returned. In the kitchen, my daughter had already settled into her morning performance. A warm smile, breakfast waiting, a note on the table that read, "Good morning. Let me know if you need help." I nodded gratefully, pretending to struggle with reading the note, and reached out to squeeze her hand. My daughter smiled as if touched. That alone nearly made me lose control. How easy the act came to her. How naturally she played the loving caretaker. Inside, I pictured the same hand pointing at real estate listings and nursing home brochures. My son-in-law walked in moments later, clapping me on the back with an unnecessary amount of force. "Big day today," he said loudly, as if I were still deaf. "Rest up, old man. We'll handle everything." I nodded again, acting the part. When both of them left the room to get ready for errands, I slipped my cell phone into my pocket. My daughter didn't know I still had the old flip phone Helen gave me before she passed. My daughter assumed she had control over my calls and appointments now. That mistake would be the beginning of her downfall. By the time 10 a.m. arrived, I heard the front door shut as my daughter and my son-in-law left for their morning outing. They always assumed I needed several hours of rest after morning routines. Good. That gave me freedom. I waited exactly 15 minutes. Precise timing was something years in construction taught me. Then I walked into my study, closed the door softly, and dialed a lawyer. Ellis and Crane Legal. A familiar voice answered. "This is Edward Mercer." I said calmly, "I need to update my will today. Urgent." The pause on the other end told me exactly what I needed to know. Graham remembered the last time he told me to update my documents. He must have also recalled how I brushed him off back then. "Mr. Mercer," he replied carefully, "are you feeling well enough to travel to the office?" "I'm better than I've been in years," I said, the truth hiding neatly behind the tone. "Can you see me at 11? "We'll rearrange the schedule," he said. "Come in." I hung up, grabbed my coat, and walked out with the slow, steady movement of a man recovering from hearing loss. The moment I backed out of the driveway, I felt lighter. On the 15-minute drive to Ashford, I practiced the exact face and posture I would use when returning home. Confused, tired, harmless. Meanwhile, in the quiet of my car, the memories of everything I had given my daughter surfaced. College tuition, paid. Wedding expenses, paid. Apartment down payments, paid. Car repairs, medical bills. The luxury cruise she took 1 year, while I stayed home to take care of Helen, paid. All of it given freely. All of it forgotten. When I walked into Graham Ellis's office, the familiarity grounded me. The wooden desk, the worn leather chairs, the framed diplomas, all symbols of clarity and order. Graham stood when I entered. "Edward," he said, extending his hand. "You look sharp. Sharper than my daughter expects." I muttered. That got his full attention. In his office, with the door closed, I described everything. The conversations, the plan to stage incompetence, the upcoming appointment with a doctor willing to fabricate evaluations. I told him how my daughter referred to me, how she calculated the value of my property, how she practiced affection the way one practices lines in a script. Graham listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to something colder. "We need to act quickly," he said. "If your daughter's plan succeeds before the will is updated, she could contest your decisions. That's why I'm here." Within 30 minutes, Graham drafted a completely new will. My estate would go entirely to my son, Daniel, responsible, steady, living miles away in Seattle with a family of his own. A man who never asked for anything. A man who called every Sunday. A man who drove 12 hours for Helen's funeral, even though his company was in the middle of a work crisis. My daughter would receive $1,000, a symbolic amount, a message she would understand the moment she saw it. Graham prepared the witnesses, notarized the documents, and placed everything into a sealed envelope. "Keep this safe," he said. "And Edward, do not sign anything your daughter presents to you in the next several weeks. Not a doctor's form, not a check, nothing. I won't." By the time I got home, the sun had shifted slightly across the driveway. My daughter's car was already parked there. I checked my expression in the rear view mirror. Calm, confused, aged just enough to be believable. Perfect. I entered the house slowly, letting my daughter and my son-in-law hear the cautious footsteps they expected. They greeted me with fabricated warmth and exaggerated concern. "You look tired," my daughter said loudly, guiding me toward my recliner. "Did you rest?" I nodded, pointing to my ears, pretending speech still felt overwhelming. She smiled sweetly. Inside, something cold in me answered that smile. I placed the sealed envelope exactly where I wanted it. On the kitchen counter beside the pile of mail they always sorted for me. Then I went to the living room and positioned myself in my favorite recliner, newspaper open, eyes half closed. 20 minutes later, the world shifted. A gas came from the kitchen, sharp, unmistakably my daughter's. Paper rustled. More rustling. A thud on the counter. Then my daughter's voice, trembling with fury. Mark, get in here right now." Footsteps thundered in. "What?" my son-in-law asked. The sound of paper being slapped onto the counter. "Read this." My daughter hissed. Silence. Deep silence. Then my daughter exploded, voice cracking with disbelief and rage. "He changed everything. All of it goes to Daniel. The house. The accounts. Everything." A chair scraped across the tile as someone stumbled backward. My son-in-law spoke low, dangerous. "When?" "Today," my daughter spat. "Today, while we were out." The anger in her voice grew jagged. "This is because of that hearing," she said. "He must have understood us. He must have picked up something." "He can't hear," my son-in-law insisted. "He was completely gone 3 weeks ago. Maybe he's confused. Maybe someone manipulated him. He couldn't even sign a grocery list yesterday," my daughter argued. "How did he suddenly get to an attorney's office?" "What matters," my son-in-law replied, "is we fix this before he does anything else. We need that evaluation. We need that incompetence filing." Every sound in that kitchen struck my nerves like a hammer on steel. My daughter inhaled shakily. "Tomorrow, I'll call Dr. Holloway tonight. We'll move the appointment up. He won't be able to refuse if we tell him it's urgent." "Good," my son-in-law said. "And once the evaluation is done, we file the petition. The will gets contested. Daniel loses everything." My daughter exhaled. "Dad won't remember any of this. Not if the doctor writes it correctly." A strange calm settled inside me then. A clarity. My daughter was willing to erase me entirely. But I still had something she didn't know. I could hear every word. I remained in my recliner, pretending to nap until the conversation ended. When I opened my eyes, my daughter stood near the doorway, studying me. "Dad," she said softly, too softly, "are you awake?" I blinked in slow confusion. She forced a smile. "Everything's fine," she said gently. "Rest tonight. We'll take care of things." I nodded. Inside, a fire had already started to burn. She believed she was winning. She had no idea her downfall had already begun. The house felt colder that evening. Not because of the temperature, but because of the shift in the air. After discovering the updated will, my daughter and my son-in-law moved around the house with a tense urgency that didn't belong to loving family members. Every footstep carried calculation. Every whisper hinted at a new scheme. I kept the same dazed, quiet demeanor I had perfected over the past few days. My daughter brought me a tray of soup and bread, speaking loudly and slowly as if addressing a child. I nodded and smiled to keep up the illusion. Inside, I was memorizing everything. After dinner, my daughter settled into the living room with her laptop, while my son-in-law busied himself with scattered papers on the dining table. The rustling and typing echoed through the room like the early stages of a storm. I could feel their eyes flicker toward me occasionally, checking my reactions, checking my awareness, checking whether their plan needed adjusting. I made my face soft, blank, uninterested. Eventually, I stood and pointed upstairs, miming exhaustion. My daughter nodded sympathetically and wrote on her notepad, "Rest, Dad. Big day tomorrow." Big day. Those were the words that stuck with me. I climbed the stairs slowly, stopping just near the landing where the heating vent carried the clearest sound. I positioned myself against the wall, heart steady, breath slow. My daughter spoke first. "Did you read the whole will?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Yes," my son-in-law said, tone tight. "Everything goes to Daniel. Everything. And your father left you $1,000 for reasons you'll understand." My daughter let out a low, bitter sound. "Of course I understand. He thinks I'm greedy. After everything I've done." Everything she had done? The memory of her calling me a burden flashed hot across my chest. My son-in-law leaned closer. His chair creaked. "We need Dr. Holloway to confirm tomorrow morning. Once an evaluation is signed, the court will have grounds to challenge the will. If Daniel tries to claim anything, we'll argue your father was mentally compromised. And if the judge asks about the date the will was signed," my daughter asked, "we'll say confusion, hearing loss, lack of judgment, anything that supports incompetence." My son-in-law replied, "The doctor's evaluation will back it up." My daughter exhaled shakily. What if Dad remembers the appointment? What if he says he wasn't confused? My son-in-law made a scoffing noise. "Your father can barely hear. And even if he tries to argue, the evaluation will say otherwise. The judge will trust the doctor. Dr. Holloway owes us," my daughter added. "He wouldn't risk losing everything he's built." Hearing those words made my pulse tighten. My daughter had transformed my life into something negotiable, something tradable as long as her ambition was satisfied. The voices paused for a moment. Papers shuffled. Something heavy dropped onto the table. Then my daughter whispered, "I want that house, Mark. I want that life in Cedar Bay. And your father-in-law is standing in the way." Those words sliced deeper than anything before. I waited until their conversation faded into vague murmurs, then slipped into my bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. My hand found Helen's wedding ring again. I held it tightly, grounding myself with the memory of someone who had loved me selflessly. Helen would never have believed that our daughter could say those things. Helen would never have believed that our daughter could plan such destruction. But Helen no longer lived in this world. I did, and I had to face the truth alone. Later that night, when the house grew still, I retrieved my secret cell phone from the nightstand. The dim glow illuminated the room, just enough for me to dial Daniel's number. "Dad?" Daniel answered after the second ring, voice cautious. "Is everything okay?" "Son," I whispered, "this stays between us. My hearing returned days ago." "Completely." Daniel fell silent. "I've been pretending," I continued, "because of what I overheard." I explained everything. My daughter's insults, the plan to place me in Sunset Pines, the fabricated evaluation, the timeline, the real estate calculations, the updated will, the upcoming appointment. Daniel's breathing grew rough with disbelief. "Dad, this is criminal. This is elder manipulation. Fraud. Abuse." "I know," I replied quietly, "but I need to play this correctly. I need your help." Daniel hesitated. "What do you want me to do?" "Tomorrow," I said, "when your sister calls you, and she will sound concerned, worried, agree that perhaps an evaluation might be necessary. Let her believe you doubt me." "Dad, I don't like lying to family," Daniel said. "She stopped being family," I replied firmly. When she tried to erase me, Daniel exhaled. "Okay, I'll do it. And Daniel, document everything she says." Of course. We ended the call with a plan, a purpose, and a feeling I hadn't had in a long time. Someone on my side. That night, I barely slept. My mind rehearsed every detail of the morning to come. My daughter and my son-in-law believed I would remain quiet and obedient. The confused old man they thought they could manipulate. But I had something they didn't expect. Patience. By sunrise, I was ready. My daughter moved around the kitchen with nervous energy, slamming drawers, tapping her fingers, reheating coffee that she barely drank. My son-in-law buzzed around her with forced optimism. "Just follow the plan," he said. "The moment Dr. Holloway signs the evaluation, everything shifts in our favor." At 8:30 a.m., I walked slowly into the kitchen, rubbing my temples, pretending to struggle with balance. My daughter immediately brightened. "Dad," she said loudly, "we have a visitor coming today. A doctor, just a checkup." I widened my eyes in confusion. She wrote quickly on her notepad, "Routine evaluation. Nothing to fear." I nodded slowly. My daughter's relief showed instantly. She believed the performance. She believed I had no idea what was coming. At 9:42 a.m., my daughter placed a call. I heard only her half of the conversation. "Yes, Dr. Holloway," she said sweetly. "Yes, my father will be ready. Yes, I understand how important this is." Her tone changed suddenly, sharp and urgent. "Doctor, please remember everything we discussed. This evaluation is crucial." My chest tightened. Even now, she was pressuring a professional to commit fraud. By 9:58 a.m., the driveway filled with the sound of tires crunching over gravel. A silver sedan pulled in. My daughter adjusted my shirt collar, patted my hand gently, and whispered, "Just follow along, Dad. We're here to help." I kept my face blank. Inside, the storm was building. A knock sounded at the door, a soft, polite tap. "Dr. Holloway," my daughter said brightly, opening the door with a warmness she never used on me. "Thank you for coming." A middle-aged man entered, holding a leather briefcase. My daughter began speaking in hushed tones she assumed I couldn't hear. "Please remember," she whispered, "we need confirmation of confusion. Memory decline. Poor judgment." The doctor nodded. My daughter turned toward me with the same manufactured concern she rehearsed daily. "Dad," she said slowly, "this is Dr. Holloway. He'll just ask some questions." I nodded weakly. The doctor smiled. "Let's talk in the living room, Mr. Mercer." My daughter hovered behind him, watching, urging, nearly trembling with anticipation. The doctor asked the first question. "Mr. Mercer, do you know what day it is?" I stared at him. I knew exactly what day it was, but I also knew exactly what I needed to do. I let my eyes drift toward the window. The doctor wrote something down. My daughter inhaled sharply, almost triumphant. But as the doctor continued his evaluation, and as I answered with strategically timed confusion, a strange calm washed through me. They thought they were winning. They thought this evaluation would erase me. But this test had two purposes. One for them, and one for me. I wasn't documenting my decline. I was documenting their destruction. The evaluation continued with slow, deliberate questions, each one designed to pull weakness out of me. Dr. Holloway sat across from me with a clipboard balanced on his knee, pen tapping lightly as if eager to write something damning. My daughter stood behind the doctor, hands clasped tightly, eyes wide with forced encouragement. My son-in-law lingered near the hallway, leaning just enough to listen but pretending not to. The first few questions were simple. My name, my age, the city I lived in. I answered each one correctly but added hesitation, letting my eyes wander, pretending to process slowly. My daughter nodded approvingly with each stuttered response, mistaking my performance for genuine decline. "Mr. Mercer," the doctor asked softly, "can you tell me what season it is?" I let my gaze drift toward the living room window. Leaves on the trees outside shifted in a gentle wind, fresh green, a clear sign of spring. But instead of answering directly, I tilted my head and frowned, pretending to search for the right word. The doctor wrote something down immediately. My daughter's breath hitched with satisfaction. Dr. Holloway continued, "And who is the current mayor of Redwood Hills?" I blinked slowly. I knew the answer, but I also knew that giving that answer cleanly would sabotage what I was building. So I murmured something vague, deliberately too quiet to be understood. The doctor leaned forward. My daughter took a step closer, anticipation lighting her face. "Could you repeat that, Mr. Mercer?" I pretended frustration, then whispered, "I forget." My daughter let out a silent sigh of relief, shoulders loosening. "Next question. Can you count backward from 20? I nodded and began, letting my voice waver slightly. 2019-17. I paused intentionally. A mistake. Not enough to appear incompetent, but just enough to appear slipping. Perfect. The doctor scribbled more notes. My daughter's expression brightened further. She believed she was witnessing the unraveling of my mind. She didn't realize she was watching construction of her own downfall. After several more questions, the doctor closed his folder gently. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer. You've been very cooperative." My daughter stepped forward immediately, tone bright, eager. "Doctor, would you like to speak privately?" My stomach twisted. Of course, she wanted to steer the narrative. She couldn't risk the doctor forming conclusions that didn't fit her plan. The doctor nodded, and the two moved toward the kitchen. My son-in-law glanced my way, offering a stiff smile dripping with false sympathy. "Don't worry, old man," he said too loudly. "We're here to help you." I gave him a confused, shaky nod. On the outside, I looked fragile. Inside, I felt razor-sharp. I waited several seconds, then shifted in my recliner just enough to hear the conversation unfolding in the kitchen. The doctor's voice came first, steady, professional. "Your father's responses suggest mild cognitive decline, but nothing conclusive." My daughter's voice sliced through the air, low and urgently pleading. "Doctor, what you saw today isn't everything. My father wanders at night. My father forgets meals. My father loses track of time." Lies. But lies she had rehearsed. "He nearly burned the kitchen last week," my daughter continued. "He falls asleep in his chair constantly. He doesn't recognize familiar dates. I worry every day that something terrible will happen." Dr. Holloway hesitated. "Those are concerning symptoms, but I need documentation. Medical records. Evidence." "I understand," my daughter said, lowering her voice further. "But you and I talked before. I told you how important this evaluation is for my father's care." "Care," she said, "not control, not inheritance. Care." My daughter had learned how to disguise greed as compassion. The doctor sighed. "I can write a preliminary recommendation of supervised living and a note suggesting possible cognitive impairment, but I cannot diagnose formal incompetence without further review." My daughter swallowed hard. "Is it enough to begin a petition?" The doctor paused again. "It will support it." "Yes." A chilling silence followed, one filled with the weight of betrayal. My daughter exhaled shakily. "Thank you, doctor. You're doing the right thing. My father needs support. Proper support. Support meant control. Control meant money. Money meant my house." The doctor returned to the living room with my daughter behind him, wearing triumph like a new coat. The doctor smiled kindly at me. "Mr. Mercer, I'll finalize my notes and send them to your daughter. Thank you for your time." I nodded slowly, pretending not to understand half of what he said. The doctor packed his things, offered polite farewell, and disappeared through the front door. My daughter watched his car leave with the intensity of a hawk tracking prey. Then she turned toward me. "Dad," she said sweetly, "how about some tea? You look tired." Tea? As if that single act of comfort could hide what I just heard. I nodded again, keeping my face blank. My daughter walked into the kitchen, humming cheerfully. Too cheerfully. My son-in-law followed her with a grin that twisted my stomach. I sat alone in the living room, listening to the faint clatter of a kettle being filled and the whispered conversation that floated behind it. My son-in-law whispered he did it. My daughter replied, "Yes, a recommendation for supervised living. That's the first step. And the will, we challenge it." My daughter said firmly, "We say Dad was confused. We say Dad was manipulated. We say Dad can't make rational decisions. The judge will trust the doctor." A cold calm washed over me. I had known they were planning something terrible. But hearing the exact words from my daughter's mouth, that was something else entirely. I stood slowly, letting my knees crack, as they typically did. My daughter looked up at me from the stove, smiling warmly. "Dad," she said, "sit down. Your tea is almost ready." I pointed upstairs and rubbed my forehead, pretending a headache. She nodded sympathetically. "Rest. Big changes coming. Everything will be better soon." Big changes. Oh, yes, but not the changes she imagined. I climbed the stairs, returned to my room, and closed the door. My heart pounded, not with fear, but with a dangerous clarity. My daughter and my son-in-law were moving fast. The petition for incompetence would be filed within days. Once filed, my daughter would gain temporary authority over financial decisions. If that happened, the house would be gone. My accounts would be frozen. My independence would vanish. Everything would slip away. Unless I moved faster. I dialed Daniel again. "Dad." Daniel answered immediately. "What happened?" "The doctor came," I said. "Your sister pressured him. He wrote something that will support a petition. The filing could happen as early as tomorrow." Daniel cursed softly. "What do? "We stay ahead of them," I replied. "We make sure every lie collapses the moment your sister presents it, and we document everything." Daniel inhaled deeply. "Dad, we're going to take them down." "Yes," I whispered, "but not yet." I needed my daughter and my son-in-law to believe they were winning. I needed them to push harder, reveal everything, expose themselves beyond repair. The storm was coming, but I controlled the wind. I ended the call, slipped the phone back into the nightstand, and stood by the window, looking out at the home Helen and I had built. The house looked peaceful in the afternoon sunlight, but inside, betrayal had become a living thing. Still, something stronger lived here too: memory, love, history, none of which I would let my daughter erase. Not without a fight. A fight she didn't even realize had already begun. The rest of the day unfolded like a stage play in which every actor already knew the ending, except the one audience member who could see behind the curtain. My daughter kept checking her phone, pacing around the living room, waiting for the doctor's report. My son-in-law lingered near the front window, tapping his fingers against the sill as if anticipating a delivery that would change his life. Meanwhile, I sat in my recliner, quiet and compliant, pretending to drift between awareness and confusion. My daughter would ask if I wanted lunch, water, rest. Each time, I nodded with gratitude, keeping my eyes soft and my demeanor frail. Inside, I was taking notes. Every whisper, every glance, every shift in their tone. Everything. Around 4 p.m., my daughter's phone chimed. The sound echoed sharply through the living room, urgent, decisive. Her face illuminated with triumph before she even opened the message. "Mark," she called out, breathless. "It's here." My son-in-law rushed over. My daughter held the phone screen up to him, and I watched their expressions morph from anticipation to satisfaction. "It's perfect," my daughter whispered. "Exactly what we needed." My son-in-law placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then we file tomorrow morning." The finality of those words struck me harder than anything else that day. File tomorrow. They weren't wasting a moment. My daughter slipped her phone into her pocket and turned toward me with a smile so warm it sickened me. "Dad," she said loudly, "everything's okay. Just rest. We're taking care of everything." Taking care. I nodded and pretended to yawn. As soon as I stood from my chair, my daughter rushed to steady my arm, guiding me gently toward the stairs. I led her, leaning slightly as if her support were necessary. "Get some sleep," she urged. "Tomorrow will be easier." Her voice carried a softness that would have fooled anyone else. But behind it, I could hear gears turning. I reached my bedroom, closed the door, and allowed the act to drop. The frail man disappeared instantly, replaced by someone I barely recognized, a man who felt the weight of betrayal and the sharpness of purpose. I sat at my desk, pulled out my private phone, and dialed Daniel again. "Dad." He answered immediately. "What happened?" "The doctor sent the report." I said, "Your sister and your brother-in-law plan to file tomorrow." Daniel was silent for a beat. "Dad, then we need to do something tonight." "Yes," I said, "but not what you think." "What do you mean?" "We let them file." Daniel sucked in a breath. "Dad, that could give her temporary authority over your decisions." "It could," I agreed, "but the filing itself exposes intent. Once they file, everything is on record. Every lie becomes part of the official documentation." Daniel understood instantly. "Then we can counterfile with evidence." "Exactly." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Dad, you're playing a dangerous game." I'm playing the only game that gives me a chance to keep my dignity. I replied, "In my home." Daniel was quiet for several seconds before saying, "I'll be on the first flight out tomorrow morning." "No," I said firmly. "Not yet. If you show up, your sister adjusts her behavior. She becomes more careful. I need her careless. I need her confident." Daniel hesitated. "I hate this." "I know, but trust me. I trust you, Dad. I just don't trust them." "Good," I said. "Neither do I." We ended the call. The next morning arrived with a heaviness that sat thick in the air. Sunlight crept across my room like slow movement through fog. I rose at 7 o'clock, dressed myself with steady hands, and sat on the edge of bed, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. Downstairs, my daughter was already awake, moving around the kitchen with jittery excitement. My son-in-law hovered near the counter, flipping through a stack of papers, likely the petition forms they intended to file. I walked down the stairs with the slow, careful steps expected of me. My daughter's head snapped up immediately. "Dad," she said brightly. "Good morning. How did you sleep?" I smiled mildly, lifting a hand to my ear to mimic confusion. My daughter's expression softened with feigned empathy. "Don't worry," she wrote on her notepad. "Everything is under control." Under control. She believed it. She placed a plate of toast in front of me, speaking loudly. "Eat something, Dad. You need strength." Strength. It was ironic. My daughter encouraged the very thing she hoped I didn't have. I ate slowly, letting crumbs fall purposely, watching how my daughter observed each small action. She cataloged everything. Every fumble, every pause, every distant look. She was building a case in her head. After breakfast, she turned to my son-in-law and whispered, "We should leave soon. If we file early, we can get ahead of the rush." My son-in-law nodded. My daughter approached me again. "Dad," she said loudly, "Mark and I are going to run a quick errand. Rest, okay? We'll be back soon." I gave her a slow nod. My daughter's smile faltered just slightly, as if she expected me to ask questions I was no longer capable of forming. But the lack of curiosity comforted her. She kissed my forehead, grabbed her purse, and hurried to the door. My son-in-law followed, pausing only to say, "Lock the door behind us. Stay inside." The door closed. Silence swept through the house. Then I moved. I strode straight to the drawer of my study and retrieved the will, my copy, the one Graham insisted I keep. I placed it into a folder alongside printed emails, receipts, and the handwritten notes I had taken over the last few days. I placed the folder in a briefcase. Helen's old briefcase, the one she used when she worked in administration at the school. It felt symbolic. Somehow, her memory protected me once again. I then drove directly to Graham's office. Graham's secretary looked startled to see me. "Mr. Mercer," she said, "are you?" "I'm here to prepare my defense," I said calmly. Graham emerged moments later, face lined with concern. "Edward, what happened?" "They're filing this morning," I said. "I want to begin the counteraction." We entered his office. I placed the briefcase on the table and opened it. "These," I said, "are my daughter's words, plans, intentions, all documented." Graham began reading. As he read, his eyebrows rose higher and higher. "This," he said quietly, "is enough to bury their petition before it even breathes." "Good," I replied. "However," Graham added, "I need one more thing. Something undeniable. Something that proves your daughter's motive." I leaned back. "She's coming home today expecting a victory." "Yes," Graham said. "But tomorrow, she'll receive something else. An invitation to court. And I want her to walk into that courtroom believing she already won." I understood then. We weren't just preparing to fight. We were preparing to watch the collapse of a scheme built on lies. I left Graham's office feeling strangely calm. The sun glimmered across the pavement, and for the first time in weeks, the world felt solid beneath my feet. When I got home, I placed the briefcase under my bed. My daughter and my son-in-law returned an hour later, breathless and ecstatic. "It's done," my daughter said to my son-in-law. "We filed." My son-in-law laughed. Finally, it's happening. I stepped into the living room, making my expression confused and gentle. My daughter turned to me with a radiant, triumphant smile. "Dad," she said softly, "everything will be okay now." I nodded. Inside, I thought, yes, but not for you. My daughter floated through the house the rest of the afternoon, as if the world were finally beginning to bend in her favor. My son-in-law trailed behind, giddy with anticipation. Every glance shared between them carried silent messages: relief, triumph, greed, satisfaction. Meanwhile, I maintained the role they had assigned me. Confused, quiet, unaware. Around 5 p.m., my daughter entered the living room holding her notepad. She knelt beside my recliner and wrote slowly, "Dad, big day tomorrow. Just rest. Nothing to worry about." I nodded, letting my gaze drift unfocused toward the window. My daughter placed a blanket across my knees, so gently that anyone watching would have been moved by the gesture. But the softness in her hands did not match the sharpness I had already heard in her voice. After dinner, my daughter and my son-in-law sat at the kitchen table with the petition form spread out before them. Their voices drifted up the stairs as I pretended to sleep. "The evaluation is at 10 a.m., my daughter whispered. "Once the doctor signs the incompetency form, everything else falls into place." After that, my son-in-law said, "We schedule the emergency hearing. Then we control the house, the accounts, the medical authority. And the White Ridge property," my daughter added, voice thick with longing. I can already picture the new kitchen. Their voices faded as exhaustion overtook them. Doors closed softly. Lights dimmed. Only then did I rise from the bed. I walked downstairs, checked the locks, checked the documents, checked my phone for updates from my attorney Graham and from my son Daniel. Everything was aligning exactly as expected. Before going back upstairs, I paused at the bottom step and looked around my house. My home, not my daughter's, not my son-in-law's, not a piece of property in someone else's future plan. Every object in the room held memories of Helen. Warm laughter, soft footsteps, quiet strength. The good years. The years before I mistook generosity for love. Almost over. I whispered. I slept lightly. At dawn, sunlight washed across the floorboards, and I rose with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. Downstairs, my daughter was already bustling around the kitchen preparing coffee. My son-in-law sat at the table, rehearsing lines under his breath. Phrases like concern for safety, increasing confusion, requires supervised care. My daughter looked up with a bright smile that was too wide to be real. "Dad," she said loudly, "good morning. Today is important." I gave a puzzled nod and placed a hand to my ear. Her smile widened, reassured by the act. My son-in-law stood and guided me toward a chair at the table. "Sit here, Thomas," he said loudly. "Doctor will be here soon. We want everything to go smoothly." Everything. At 9:48 a.m., a sleek black sedan pulled into the driveway. My daughter inhaled sharply. "This is it," she whispered. "Act natural." My son-in-law laughed nervously. As natural as someone who's losing his mind. My daughter elbowed him sharply. "Not funny. Not now." The doorbell rang. My daughter rushed to the door, plastering on the expression of a loving, overwhelmed caretaker. My son-in-law straightened his shirt, tried to look authoritative. A tall man stepped inside, the borrowed Dr. Henderson. He wore a polished expression. The expression of someone who considered himself smart enough to manipulate the system and charming enough to get away with it. My daughter clasped her hands together, as if relieved to see him. "Doctor, thank you so much for coming. Dad is not himself." Dr. Henderson nodded sympathetically. "Happy to help. Let's begin." The doctor approached me with a smile that almost looked genuine. "Good morning, sir," he said, speaking slowly and clearly. "I'm here to check on your cognitive health. This will be quick and simple." I blinked slowly, feigning confusion. My daughter stood behind him, nodding in encouragement like a stage director pleased with her performers. For the next several minutes, the doctor asked questions designed to make me appear disoriented. "What day is it?" I shrugged. "What season are we in?" I paused, looked out the window, and shook my head. Who was the current president? I murmured something incoherent. My daughter exchanged satisfied looks with her husband. The doctor scribbled in his folder. The final test was a series of instructions. Touch your left ear. I touched my right elbow. Name any animal. I blinked at him. Count backward from 10. I stared at the ceiling. Dr. Henderson closed his folder with a barely concealed smirk. All right. Thank you. My daughter clasped her hands against her chest. Doctor, is my dad, is it serious? The doctor nodded solemnly. I'll file my report this afternoon. Based on what I observed, it appears cognitive decline is present. I'll recommend protective supervision. My daughter's eyes filled with dramatic tears. I just want what's best for him. My son-in-law placed an arm around her shoulders. We're doing the right thing. The doctor shook my hand and left. My daughter closed the door behind him and leaned against it, exhaling with pure satisfaction. We did it, she whispered to my son-in-law. It's over. I sat silently at the table, watching them celebrate. My daughter kissed her husband, laughing through mock tears. This afternoon we filed an emergency request, my daughter said, and once the judge signs it, we'll have full access. House, accounts, medical authority. My son-in-law grinned. Time to plan the White Ridge renovation. My daughter clapped her hands together in delight. Then, a sharp knock at the door. My daughter froze. My son-in-law looked toward the entryway, perplexed. A second knock, firmer. My daughter wiped her face, straightened her shirt, and opened the door. A uniformed courier stood on the steps, holding a large envelope. For Edward Mercer, the courier said. My daughter turned toward me. Dad, something for you. She walked over and placed the envelope into my hand, still convinced that nothing inside it could possibly threaten her beautiful plan. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a single document, stamped with the seal of the county court. My daughter leaned in. What is it, Dad? I looked up at her, allowing the confusion to fall away. Her smile faltered. I slid the paper across the table toward her. Her eyes skimmed the page. Her face drained of color. My son-in-law snatched the document from her trembling hands. His jaw dropped. The document read, Notice of counterpetition and court summons. Petitioner, Edward Mercer. Respondents, Anna Miller and Mark Miller. Hearing scheduled, Monday, 9 a.m. Subject, fraudulent petition and attempted exploitation of a dependent adult. My daughter's mouth opened and closed with no sound. My son-in-law backed up a step. I folded my hands calmly on the table. The room fell silent. Then I spoke, not softly, not loudly, but clearly. I heard everything. My daughter's knees nearly buckled. My son-in-law's face twisted into something between fear and disbelief. Before they could speak, I added, and this is only the beginning. The house fell into a silence, so deep it felt physical, thick, suffocating. My daughter stared at the court summons as if it were a detonator. My son-in-law whispered, What happens now? I stood. Now, I said, now you will finally understand what happens when the person you try to destroy stops pretending to be helpless. My daughter stood frozen, clutching the court summons as if the paper itself burned her fingers. My son-in-law hovered behind, shifting step to step like someone trying to run, without knowing which direction offered safety. For the first time in 3 weeks, the house was silent for the right reason. Fear, a kind of fear only truth can create. My daughter whispered, barely audible, Dad, what do you mean you heard everything? I folded the empty envelope and set it neatly on the table. My hearing returned the day I came home. I said, the moment I stepped through that door, the first words I heard were my daughter calling me an old burden and my son-in-law calculating the value of my home. My daughter staggered backward as if struck. Dad, wait, that's not. I raised a hand. You also discussed fabricating medical evaluations, forging symptoms, petitioning the court to remove my independence, seize my home, control my bank accounts. You called my life an obstacle. You called my care performance. My daughter's breath hitched sharply. My son-in-law stepped forward, palms out. Edward, listen. No, I said firmly. For the first time in years, you listen. The air tightened. Every whispered plan. I continued. Every insult. Every lie. Every calculation done while sitting at the table your mother and I built with our bare hands. I heard all of it. My daughter's face crumpled. My son-in-law swallowed hard but said nothing. I pointed toward the court summons. That document is signed by a judge who already reviewed the evidence provided by my attorney and by your brother Daniel. The court sees this as exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The law does not take that lightly. My daughter slumped into a chair. My son-in-law pressed a shaking hand to his forehead. The house, at last, was honest. My daughter whispered, "Dad, please, we can fix this." "You cannot fix what you tried to bury," I replied. "You cannot undo the words you spoke when you believed I was deaf. You cannot rewrite your intentions after being caught." My daughter wiped her face, though no tears fell now. "Dad, I'm family. You stopped being family the moment you plotted my disappearance from my own life." My son-in-law stepped forward again, voice cracking. "Edward, this will ruin us. We'll lose everything." I looked him in the eyes. "You were ready to take everything from me without hesitation." Silence again. My daughter clutched the court summons as if it were a lifeline, not a verdict. What are you going to do?" she whispered. "That," I said, "depends on how honest you can be." My daughter looked up sharply. Honesty had never been her strength, but desperation makes honesty feel like salvation. "Dad," she said shakily. "Yes, I talked about the money. Yes, I said things I shouldn't have said. But I swear I didn't mean all of it. I was stressed, scared, overwhelmed. You meant enough of it." I cut in. "You meant the part where you called Sunset Manor solution. You meant the part where you described my future bedroom as a storage room. You meant the part where you said your life would finally be peaceful without me." My daughter's mouth quivered. My son-in-law stepped forward. What do you want from us?" I considered the question. "What I want," I repeated, letting the words settle. "I want peace. I want autonomy. I want safety. I want the home your mother and I built to remain untouched by greed." My daughter nodded quickly, desperate. Okay, Dad, yes. Absolutely. Whatever you want. Please, just don't go through with this hearing. Don't destroy our lives." "Destroy your lives?" I echoed. "I didn't file the petition. The attorney did after hearing your plans. The court accepted it because the law sees what you did as cruelty, not a misunderstanding." My son-in-law tightened his jaw. "So what now? Jail? Fines? Public record?" I paused. My heart softened, not toward them, but toward the weighted situation, toward the recognition that my wife Helen would not want vengeance. Helen would want justice paired with dignity. She would want me to reclaim my life, not to drown in bitterness. "You are leaving this house today," I said, without negotiation, without delay. My daughter exhaled shakily but nodded. All right, we'll go." And I continued, "You will not contest a will. Not now, not ever. You will not contact me for money. You will not ask for access to the house, my accounts, or my care. Your involvement in my life ends here." My daughter closed her eyes tightly, absorbing each blow. My son-in-law attempted a stern face, but failed. "If we agree, will you cancel the hearing?" "I will request dismissal," I said. "But the court may still require statements." "That is no longer my decision." My daughter nodded weakly. Okay. "Good," I said. "Then start packing." My daughter looked toward the stairs, shoulders sagging. The next hour unfolded quietly. My daughter and my son-in-law moved through the house, gathering their belongings. The same belongings I had once helped them buy. The same belongings they nearly weaponized against me. Suitcases rolled across the tile floor. Cupboard doors opened and closed. A few mumbled disagreements filled the hallways, but nothing like before. When they finished, my daughter stood at the doorway holding her suitcase handle so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Dad," she said, barely a whisper, "please don't hate me." "I don't hate you," I said softly. I simply see you clearly now, and I will not allow myself to be hurt again. A single tear escaped down her cheek. She nodded once. My son-in-law opened the car trunk. They loaded their things. My daughter turned back one last time. For the first time in years, she said nothing. Good. Words had been her sharpest weapon. The engine started. Gravel crackled under the tires. The car reversed, paused as if hesitating, then pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. I exhaled slowly, letting the air in my lungs flow freely again. For the first time since my hearing returned, there was real silence in the house. Not the silence of betrayal, but the silence of peace. I walked room to room, touching the objects infused with memories. Helen's apron, the wooden railing I built with my own hands, the old photographs decorating the walls. The home felt lighter, as if relieved to finally breathe. On the kitchen table sat my wife's wedding ring in its small dish. I slid it onto my finger. I did it, Helen. I whispered. I finally listened. Then I opened every window in the house, letting sunlight and fresh air sweep through the rooms like a cleansing tide. By evening, I sat in my recliner and called my son Daniel. Dad, Daniel said warmly, "Is everything okay now?" "It is," I replied. "For the first time in a long time, it truly is." "What happens next?" Daniel asked gently. I smiled. "What happens next," I said, "is the part of my life I get to design myself." And with that, the house finally felt like home again. If my story reached your heart even a little, take a moment before you go. Hit subscribe, share where you're watching from, and let me know your thoughts. Your support helps these stories find the people who need them most. Thank you for being here.